Fala galera, um
Joined by
videozinho
Joel
dos
and
devs
Tony,
aqui
and
falando
we're here
sobre
to
a
talk about a
economia
really
do
exciting
New
topic, the
World. Vamos
economy.
ver como que
If you
vai
use the trading
funcionar
post, the faction
a
store,
economia,
kill
mano.
mobs, run expeditions, you're contributing to the economy, and we're here to explain to you what that looks like, some of the
O que eles
problems we
estão
face with
achando
our
da
economy,
economia, os
and
problemas
how
que
we
eles estão
identify those
enfrentando
problems
e
using some of our tools.
vamos lá.
So, speaking of problems, Tony, let's go ahead and get started. Can you walk me through some of the challenges in maintaining an economy?
Are you saying I'm a problem?
A little bit.
Awesome. So, I mean, when it comes to economy, some of the big things that we do face and some of the things that we front or that we are faced up against.
Isso mesmo, Edmar.
The big one is actually wealth disparity. And so what that means is when you have players that play the game an absolute ton, then you have players that maybe log in once or twice a week. You end up with this huge wealth gap. Now, typically, all in all, in the reality of it, that's okay on one end, but on the other end, what happens is prices start to ramp up. We end up with inflation. There's just like a lot of different things and a lot of real world economic kind of terms that we face with. And what we want to do is we want to try to keep that gap a little bit, I guess, shorter, if you will. And so we take a look at how is wealth being distributed. Do we need to do things like distribute wealth more on a weekly basis? So you don't need to log in every single day, but then there's still a source of wealth for people who do want to play the game for 10 or 15 hours a day. And so there's like a lot of complex problems trying to balance the two, because what we want to do is we want somebody who only has a couple hours a week to play to feel like their time is valued. And then we also want to make sure that somebody who plays the game an absolute ton still feels like their time is valued, but in doing so, not making it so they're so far different that their experiences in the game are just completely opposite of one another.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the bigger issues we face. And it's interesting that you say that like these are real world problems we're tackling, because they are. You see the Fed meet and they talk about inflation and how rates are going to impact that. Those are the kind of conversations we have to have.
Galera, por enquanto aqui, eles estavam explicando que eles estão... que tá tendo jogadores muito ricos, porque o jogador joga 15 horas por dia, e os jogadores que jogam menos tempo não tá conseguindo ter aquela riqueza, porque os farms estão concorridos, as coisas são bem concorridas, e eles queriam dar uma diferença menor. Faz de conta, um cara que joga muito e um cara que entra 2, 3 vezes por semana ter um dinheiro também. Então eles querem ver se ele dá uma bufada nisso daí, tá ligado, gente? Mas ao mesmo tempo ter o pessoal que joga mais tempo conseguir uma riqueza melhor. Mas eles querem dar uma diminuída nessa diferença. Agora, como eles vão fazer isso, não sei, vamos ver aí.
Pretty frequently with the new world economy, because it is player driven. So when we say player driven economy, Joel, can you walk us through what that means?
Absolutely. So one thing to add to that too is that players actually have the power to print their own money. They are the ones that go out and kill a mob, do an activity, and generate coin. Yeah. So talking about wealth disparity, we have a tool called the Gini index that we use, which allows us to measure the gap between the high-end players and the more casual less time-rich players. What that does for us is we can use the data mixed with a couple other dashboards that are basically faucets and sinks. It allows us to analyze every single value that is coming in for coin and assess if we make a balance change or a tuning change, what impact have we caused on both of those player groups, and how do we shorten that gap? To some degree, we want a little bit there, right? We want to make sure that the time-rich players, again, as Tony said, make it feel like their time is valued. But we have to make sure that we control inflation. So we use the Gini index to monitor basically the amount of coin coming in and the disparity between the players, coupled with dashboards that show every single source, every single faucet. And we, as designers, assess, is this the right place? Is this too easy? Is this too hard for players to get coin? Or other resources as well. It's not just coin in that case. Beyond that, we also have a few other tools in our tool belt, which are, we have a trade index that looks at the values of every item in the game to see how successful they are, how used they are. And what that does for us is really correlate, is there, let's say, iron, is this valuable, or is this losing its value over the last patch? Is there an issue with it? How do we control that to make sure that a low player can go get that easy to acquire resource and still participate in the economy and still bring value that the higher level player...
Galera, aqui ele tá explicando conforme eles têm os dados de tudo que gold que entra no jogo, por onde que entra, o material que está valendo bem, por que está valendo bem, eles têm todos os dados. Vamos dar um exemplo aqui para vocês. Teve uma época que os perks de com tava faltando no mercado, tava muito caro, tava quase um perk de com. Aí eles lançaram outro método de você transformar aqueles perk que valia 1 centavo, se transformar em perk de com, de força. Aí fez abaixar os perk para 80G, 100G e usar aqueles perk inúteis que era 1 centavo para dar uma equilibrada na economia do jogo. Só um exemplo do que aconteceu. Eu lembro ainda que nós testou no PTR, teve gente, nós saiu limpando o mercado, tudo, nós fez um gold do caramba. Quem tinha guardado então os perks, nossa. Mas é isso, esse é um exemplo, tá?
Players can then buy those resources from them. So we're looking at these different dashboards at a global scale. We're looking at them at a granular scale, so potentially individual worlds, especially say when fresh start worlds happen, we look at the individual worlds to see how the health is going for those for that index, the Gini index, or for the in and outs faucets. On top of that, we also have a lot of player feedback that we get from Discord, that we get from internal playtests, because feeling is just as important here. We want to make sure that players feel, again, that their time is valuable. So we couple all of these tools together and we try and do an assessment. We sit down, I think it's every Tuesday right now. Yeah. We sit down and we have a sync about the economy and we talk about what's successful right now. Where are resources falling behind? And we've had a few of those issues in the past, and I'm sure Tony will talk about it later with like leather, the ironhide leather being not where we want it to be versus lower tier leather. And ultimately our goal is to use these tools to balance out and make it, again, as Tony said, that everyone's time is valued.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example to touch on is leather, because that has been one of our problem children, for lack of a better word. Rawhide, the tier 1 leather, is generally a lot more expensive than ironhide, the tier 5 leather. Confusing, right? Because every other resource, tier 5 outpaces it significantly just because, or calcum, a lot more rare than iron. Runewood trees, for example, also a lot more rare. So with the iron hide issue, what steps have we taken to correct that? And when we think about a problem like that, what do we do to resolve it?
Yeah, ironhide's interesting because like, so there's wealth and there's stored wealth, and ironhide itself is at one point was such a complicated problem. We went through, I don't know how many discussions about, let's try this, can we do that, whatever. And excuse me, when we look at it at first, it becomes where is the stuff coming from and where is the stuff going? And the realization was everybody got to endgame, everybody was in high-end zones, since everybody can do everything, everybody was skinning all the things they were killing. And so the generation was just through the roof. So that was one problem. What that led to was everybody storing it because it really wasn't worth much, but people still had room in their town storages, so they would throw it in. I think at one point I was holding on to 50,000 or 60,000 ironhide for whatever reason. And so then we do some changes, and we're like, well, we can change the amount of ironhide it takes to make infused leather. I think that was one of our first changes, where we basically adjusted the recipe to consume more of it. And that helped a little bit, but you don't make a change and see a difference because there's a bunch of people with 50,000 in their storage, and then it takes 3 months for them to burn through that before you actually see any kind of return. And so then we start taking a look at, when it comes to skinning in particular, what are our level ranges for rawhide? What are the level ranges for thick hide? Because we had a problem for a while with thick hide was just super valuable because there was 3 packs of wolves you'd go farm. And so that's what everybody would do. And there was a ton of competition. And so, can we move some of those things around? And so to the rawhide example, actually, for the expansion, when we brought in dark hide, we had to move some things around again because I wanted to make sure that we had enough creatures at the high end. And so we kind of adjusted all the level things. But what that did was that removed and pushed rawhide down below level 30. Therefore, we lost the farming zone in Cutlass Keys, which was the main source of rawhide. So now we see rawhide going up because the source is obviously down. And so it's just a lot of back and forth in terms of what we can do.
Dog.
It's just a lot back and forth in terms
Galera, aqui eles estão falando que eles fizeram a mudança no drop de couro. A menos de level 30 para dropar o couro Tier 1. Isso daí fez com que as spots principais, que era em Léo, principalmente em Léos, não tivesse mais. Então fez com que o couro cru subisse muito.
In terms of what we can do, and then how do we balance the overall input to the output?
Sorry. Yeah.
Saudade Fortes de Ramos.
Why is the dog barking?
So a dog is barking because last minute I had to bring the dog in with me. So she is over there anxiously looking at me and wants to come be pet. So we're gonna try to make her stop barking. We're sorry.
She's very cute.
Yes.
I
We
mean,
need
you
to
can
give her a
sit
shot in a
right
little bit.
here.
Yeah, do you want her next to you?
I mean, bring
I think that'll make her be quiet. Yeah.
bring her over.
Sorry.
No, it's a good episode, dude.
Come here.
Hello.
All right. Sit your ass down. Come here.
Is this foreshadowing to pets?
So this is pets. We're bringing pets to New World. Sit.
So we moved some stuff around for the expansion to make sure we had enough room. Ended up moving levels around, and so rawhide is now harder to get. So then that sends the value up. Now the knock-on effect of that, right, is rawhide becomes more expensive. So all the other leathers become more expensive because they all rely on rawhide. So now we have to go circle back, figure out where can we massage the level gaps to maybe bring cutlass keys back into play. Do we not do that? And do we change the amount that rolls when you skin a level 29 creature instead? There's a lot of ways that we can kind of adjust it. And the question is what is the right way?
For sure.
And then we have to watch that data for a while.
Another thing to add there too is that there's some resistance to the price increasing. Like you yourself said, you had about 50K of that stored. Yeah. And we're very meticulous with our changes. It takes a long time to make sure that we validate we're making the right choice. In some cases, we may make a change and we may wait for a while because it takes a while for the players to drain that out of the economy, right?
E nem aqui eles estão falando do pessoal que guarda 50 mil, 100 mil recursos no banco, tá ligado? Com o jeitinho de pré-compra, o jeitinho de colocar e esperar voltar, tá? Que eles têm os dados do pessoal que tá fazendo, que faz isso, tal. Então, para eles tentar equilibrar melhor a economia.
So, in the case of rawhide, we made a change prior to the expansion, and it took a few months, but we started to see price correction. Now, again, expansion more recently, we're starting to see spikes and shocks to the economy as everything settles with the new update, right? But prior to that, it took about 2 months for that ironhide to settle out of the economy and ultimately get back to a healthy price, right? So those are the type of things that we're using, the tools that I was mentioning before, to measure and control and make sure that they retain value.
Estão falando que o couro cru, ele chegou a... Em todo o servidor, o couro cru chegou a 10 centavos, tá ligado? Principalmente antes da expansão. Aí depois que eles fizeram essa mudança, tal, na expansão, que o pessoal sentiu mais, que aí deu uma subida. E agora deu uma baixada e agora tá dando uma subidinha de novo. Vai manter o valor, né, mano?
Useful to all players and that everyone can find value quickly and easily and engage in the economy.
Aí até o couro cru, o couro tier 5 aconteceu isso.
Another really good example. Sitting at work one day and going through the dashboards and seeing that, and this goes to our item faucet and sink, that we have a overflow of it was 98.5% on wooden coins, which means that 98.5% of all wooden coins that come into the economy are just sitting there and no one's using them for anything. And we're like, what are we going to do with these things? So they have absolutely no value, and there's just hundreds of thousands of these things everywhere. And I think it was Izzy who was like, just burn them and turn them into charcoal.
Literally burn them.
We can burn them, and we did that, and then their value came up, and now you get a good bump for charcoal for them, and it may not be the best thing to do with them, but it still worked, and now they have value, and so we have a lot of options, so it's always fun to kind of mess with.
Sure. All right, so when we're designing new content, economic implications are a big thing there. So we make a new season pass, for example, we have to be very meticulous about what we're putting on that season pass and how that's going to impact the economy. So Joel, I was hoping you could talk to me a little bit about when we're designing new content, what sort of expectations do we have for how that performs economically and what considerations do we have?
Agora eles vão falar sobre o futuro da economia, vamos ver.
Absolutely. So when we're making a new item, generally we're looking for the long-term health of that item. How does it fit in our long-term goals? So we're setting up kind of a average price range, what we think its value will be, and that's not one for what players will actually decide ultimately when it gets into the economy. But we're looking for specific targets to monitor the health of that item. After we start to get it into the economy, we're looking for long-term health, making sure that that item has a purpose, that it has continual faucets and sinks for it going forward. So good examples would be new resources.
So Joel, I was hoping you could talk to me a little bit about when we're designing new content, what sort of expectations do we have for how that performs economically, and what considerations do we have for how new items might impact the economy?
Absolutely. So when we're making a new item, generally we're looking for the long-term health of that item. How does it fit in our long-term goals? So we're setting up kind of a average price range, what we think its value will be, and that's not one for what players will actually decide ultimately when it gets into the economy. But we're looking for specific targets to monitor the health of that item. After we start to get it into the economy, we're looking for long-term health, making sure that that item has a purpose, that it has continual faucets and sinks for it going forward. So good examples would be new resources that we're seeing in the expansion. We'll continue to use those in new crafting recipes. Kind of a poor example would be the flame core, my fault. It's one of those things where it doesn't quite make sense, and it's something we're going to look at assessing and kind of addressing. What do we actually want to do with this? Because it doesn't really have a home currently, right? So I think really the key of this is making sure that these items, one, have an immediate value that we're kind of
Eles querem, todos os itens que eles colocar no jogo, gente, eles querem ver se mantém um preço
addressing at the
razoável em uma longa quantidade de período. Não igual eles fizeram com o Frame Score, a Orbe de Fogo lá, que foi da Forge. E nem ele falou que foi culpa dele.
And two,
Que
long term, they really have a
Frames
home and a place.
foi do cara há um tempo,
in
depois
all
abaixou
crafting, not just
absurdamente.
in a little pigeonholed area, right? We need to make sure that these things are valuable again, long term, and that they have a purpose on the loot tables, that they have a purpose in the economy. To the wooden coins, we can always find ways to remove them or change them. But it's something that we're always actively addressing to make sure that these items continue to bring value.
Yep, absolutely. No, I think you said it really well. And I think the fun part about it is when we go into something like seasons, Joel will come to me like, hey, can we throw like this stuff for like crafting materials or whatever? And it's almost always a yes, but that kind of back and forth and the ability to have so much flexibility with what we do with our stuff and how we can like, well, we have access to this, let's pigeonhole it and move it over here. It's just, I don't know. It's a lot of levers and knobs. It's a lot of fun to play with.
For sure. All right, last question for you two. We just shipped an expansion, super exciting. What is one thing that has surprised you about how the economy has been impacted from the expansion? I know for me, golden scarab prices, I thought they would stay a lot higher than they did, and they have certainly come down a good bit. So interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, what surprised me with the expansion and the economy? Honestly, this may be a weird answer, how stable it's been. It's actually looked really good, and I was very scared. I was petrified. We just changed just about everything in the game. Yeah. And from, a designer who's looking after and keeps an eye on the economy for the whole game, when you have thousands and thousands of changes, you're like, I hope I did a lot of this math right, and, I really hope this goes well. And I think we were all, on some level, waiting for something to hit the fan or something to go completely sideways. And knock on wood, it's been really good. Yeah. So it's been fun. So it's been enjoyable.
So for me, somewhat similar. It's like performing surgery when you're going into an expansion. There's a lot of changes, and it's really hard to measure exactly what is going to have an impact. Similar feeling when we launched as well. Ultimately, I'm very surprised that the coin economy hasn't changed too much. In fact, it's more stable, I think, than it's been in a long time. But then there's also little nuances with a lot of the resources to where most of them are generally good. I think there's some areas that surprise me. Players are going faster than I expected with more of the resource and the gear side of things. But I think that's an overall positive experience, and it feels good to get to the end and get all of the resources and gear you want to engage with that in-game content. But the coin economy is really where I was surprised. I expected there to be a few more just minor issues in there, and it's been extremely stable. It's very proud of that.
Galera, eles estão falando que foi um pouco a expansão. Ele estava esperando uma coisa, que seria o pessoal demorar um pouco mais para se equipar. Mas como aconteceu a expansão e tal, em poucas semanas, em 2 semanas, quase 4% dos jogadores estava full 700. E quem tava full 700 basicamente era jogadores full bis, basicamente. Que vão perder provavelmente os itens. Perder não. Os itens não vão ser mais bis a partir do próximo patch que vai ter um nerf. Mas não é disso que a gente tá falando, né? Então. E eles não estavam esperando que o pessoal ia farmar tanto recurso, igual tá. Que nem hoje você vai numa spot e tem muita gente. Tá? E o pessoal tá se equipando bem rápido, só que isso é muito bom. Eu prefiro assim, se equipar rápido, ir pro jogo e conforme vai mudando os patch, as coisas, nerf, essas coisas, né, vai mudando o set. Mas em termos assim, eu não esperava tanto que, vamos supor, a matriz. Que nem você falou que a economia tá indo muito bem. Eu tô achando que tá indo muito bem, porque eu vou ser sincero. A matriz hoje, por causa da Gepsita, que é diária, só da matriz, você entra no jogo, você pega, vamos
And that
pôr,
brings up
umas 15, 20 Gepsita diária só de você fazer os conteúdos básicos. Comprar ali na facção, pá, você pega umas 10 Gepsita diária. Você pega lá a crafita, a Gepsita vai te dar, essas 10 vai te dar 5k de lucro. Pá, aí você vai craftar uma coisa para alguém. Ah, o selo dá mais 5k de lucro. Aí tem aquele. Só de você entrar ali e fazer uns craftinho para todo mundo assim, lá dos conteúdos, você já ganha 10, 20k de goldzinho. Aí tem o azote, que você já craftou em item bis direto. Você pode craftar esse item bis direto, que tá no meta, pôr para vender e esperar que alguém compre. Ou, mais fácil, vendo o indutor de azote. Você vai pagar 25k e vai vender por em torno de 40, 30k. 40, 50k, depende a demanda, tá? Isso daí você tem que saber a hora de vender, porque a hora de vender seria a hora que mudou a meta, certo? Que aí as guilds grandes, principalmente no servidor Leva Louca, é onde que vale mais gold isso, tá? Então vai depender muito, mas isso tá muito bom a economia. Então, tipo, para quem tem profissão, tá muito alto, tá conseguindo fazer um gold diário, tá ligado? Sem muita coisa, as profissões estão bem lucrativas. Agora, o que eles falou que eles querem aumentar para iniciante, para pessoas que jogam poucas horas por dia. Essas pessoas não têm muita, como que eu posso dizer? Elas não farmam muito, não tem profissão upada, então eles querem ver se eles mudam um pouco isso para essas pessoas. Vamos ver o que eles vão fazer, mano. Tá? É isso, galera, o videozinho dos devs sobre a economia, tá? E o que eles pretendem fazer.
us to our community question. And before we get to the community question, though, I want to thank you both for joining me for this high-level overview of the economy. If you folks have liked this, let us know. And we're happy to do a more quarterly deep dive into what's happening in the economy, what some of the hot button issues are, and what fixes we have for those sorts of issues.
E eles vão ficar de olho aí para ver coisas que aumentam o preço,
What's your favorite part of
que
the
diminui.
economy to engage in, and what ways are you making gold in game? Thank you for joining us, and we'll see
E
you in the
aqui eles
tournament.
fizeram uma pergunta para a comunidade que você pode responder lá no Discord ou no próprio link do vídeo. Como você queria fazer gold no New World? Tá?